Now, without further ado, it is my pleasure to introduce today's first speaker, Gregory Conlon, Senior Vice President with Ipsos's client organization. Greg, you have the floor.
Thanks, Ellen, and thank you to everyone for attending today. We'll take a quick look at the agenda and then we'll head right into the presentation. At the beginning of this year, the #1 question that continued to come up was who is going to be the winner of the upcoming content wars? To answer that question, we must consider just how many options these days are out there these days when it comes to content, regardless of the platform. As a consumer, how do you choose how to spend your time when there's just so much out there? And how do you deal with the fact that it keeps increasing every day? Out of all that available content, scripted originals still remain the gold standard. Over the past decade, the number of scripted original series has increased every year. And during that time, the value of the scripted original has increased as behaviors continue to change to value bingeable shows of the past. To understand how consumers make content decisions, we partnered with the UT Austin Innovation Lab and talked to a large swath of consumers, asking them what mood they were in when they fired up their most recent content choice. What we discovered is that there were 8 underlying emotional motivations to help describe why and how people make the content choices that they do. While the production cycle and ever-increasing volume of content choices were changing consumers' behaviors leading up to 2020, the events of the past year have only increased that change. From our TV Daily's syndicated title tracker, we've noticed that 1 in 3 consumers said that they were feeling highly stressed. And most of the ways that they look to manage that stress are media related. As the number of the shows has increased, so has the volume of marketing, and consumers cast their net out far and wide to make their next choice. While this increased messaging and extra choice comes a chance to break through and stand out amongst the clutter. And now, Jamie Stenziano.
Thanks, Greg. Hey, everyone. So we have a lot of conversations with clients from different corners of the industry about content positioning research. And when we have those conversations, a few themes arise and some critiques arise as well. The research is often rear view facing and maybe at best point in time snapshots that quickly fade over time. And the content positioning research can also be sometimes an audit, but doesn't really answer that critical question of where do we go from here? That content positioning research is sometimes so rooted in stated data that I can really gloss over the true content psyche of audiences. And lastly, we hear that it often lacks the global scale to reflect our clients' needs. And so as Ipsos continues to invest in the media and entertainment space, we want to bring a different feel to what used to be this content positioning study model. So we designed a multifaceted 5-phased approach using multiple data sources and analytics to give programmers and marketers a forward-looking view into the future. The 5 pillars are audience identification, size and opportunity, audience connect, targeting, and activation. And we'll get into each piece of the toolkit in a minute, but it's important here to understand where to think about the toolkit in the context of business outcomes. Business outcomes for platform or channel growth via IP, optimization of an IP's addressable market, and to enhance the commercial value of IP in the marketplace. And to those ends, our insights deliver prioritization and size of audience groups of interest for your IP, but also really go in depth around behavioral targeting and, importantly, forward-looking analytics to prioritize hooks and levers for promotions and marketing campaigns. And obviously a big part of this solution for our clients is at its core, the Ipsos DNA of being such a global firm. And across all of the components I just mentioned, we have the ability to leverage our presence in over 90 markets worldwide to truly provide global scale and boots on the ground capabilities in all of those markets for our clients. So let's take a look at each of the 5 aspects of the toolkit, and we'll get into each of these in a little bit more depth in a second, but I'll go over them here now. The first, audience identification, consisting of proprietary social analytics via Ipsos Synthesio to uncover the diehard loyal fans, to the high priority acquisition groups, and to other adjacent groups that might not have been of interest at the start of a promotional campaign, but should really be focused on as well. Once we uncover those audiences, we then sort of size the prize via custom analytics from Ipsos Data Science. From there, we can introduce a qualitative phase of research to get to know our targets better. And coming out of that deep dive, we actually create audience proxies and collect vast amounts of social data for targeting purposes. Last but very much not least, we bring in proprietary modeling from Ipsos Data Science to understand hooks and levers to inform communications. And as we go down the line and cover off on each of these tools, I'll pass it first to Jordan Massa from the Ipsos Social Intelligence Analytics Group to talk about audience identification. And Jordan, over to you.
Hi, thank you, Jamie. So starting with the audience identification phase and utilizing social data, there's really a big key benefit there, which is that we get to explore the unprompted and organic consumer conversation, meaning we're able to understand the attitudes and behaviors in their own words. And this level of insight is really beneficial at all stages of content development. And starting with the early stage, we're able to identify these key audiences through cultural trends that are emerging on social platforms early in their life cycle, which allows for the discovery of trends before they peak elsewhere. It also can help you craft enticing messaging by leveraging this unprompted conversation, so you can also understand how different fandoms are naturally talked about. Then through the pre-launch stage, social can provide engagement insights by analyzing all conversation related to a specific IP. We can also identify the drivers of conversation related to it and also size these different pockets to assess the buzz that's being generated there. Additionally, we can provide targeting guidance. We also understand that the sources of conversations. So by understanding these sources of conversations, we can really understand where they're taking place, which can also reveal additional adjacent interests. And then finally, after launch, we can identify trending topics, so we can understand what themes and topics are really creating more buzz and are helping trend the conversation related to your content, and also reveal those other related content topics that are poised to take off as well. So how we start this whole process is with an exploration of the social data related to a selected IP, which we actually could also focus on different streaming occasions or even types of content. We're really able to slice and dice this conversation however we want. We do this through our Synthesio platform, which captures social data across a broad range of social sites, including Twitter, Instagram, the big four, Facebook, YouTube, as well as blogs and forums. And we're able to pull in both text and image-based sources. Then our team of analysts will craft queries so that we can isolate those specific mentions and essentially comb the ocean of these millions of social conversations, honing in only on the mentions that matter. Then we use a combination of both tech-driven and human analytics to extract the key themes and concepts associated with that selected IP. This process, where we utilize text analytics, really lets us understand these key attitudes and behaviors in the consumer voice, and is what allows us to create this conversation landscape map, pulling out all of those key themes. So this really lets us be very powerful with our social data and comb through, hundreds of thousands of mentions and extract all those key themes in one fell swoop. Then after we apply that analytical frame, we're able to double click into all of that rich verbatim and imagery to uncover the depth and meaning to the findings and really start to reveal these distinct areas of conversation that can relate to different fandoms or occasions for engaging with the content. And now I'm going to throw it to Michael to talk more about sizing and opportunity.
Great. Thanks, Jordan. I think as we think about trying to size the marketplace and understand the opportunity, my team approached this from the perspective of being able to leverage the best that data science has to offer, and not just focus in on tried and true techniques, but really to give us a broader range of options. So to that end, we have developed what we call the segmentation evaluation system, SES, that is really a machine learning approach to segmentation, in which we run up to 1,000 different solutions per engagement. I guess we want to, yeah, there we go. I think once we are able to run those 1,000 of different segmentations, which vary by the algorithm used, the distance measures, whether we're including summary measures or data reduction, number of clusters, etc., we then are able to utilize a two-phase process of both machine and expert evaluation. So from the machine side, evaluating the solutions against a set of criteria such as segment size balance, accuracy of typing tools, etc. But then using that to winnow those 1,000 down to a more reasonable set, which then go through a series of kind of expert evaluations, resulting in a very small subset of segmentation solutions that we can then share to decide on a final segmentation. And really, what this does is it just brings much more technical rigor to the segmentation process. So shifting the balance a little bit away from art and more to the science. But it also allows us to focus much more on finding a solution that best fits the business needs. And oftentimes the process is much faster and reduces a lot of the painful back and forth that we typically might see for segmentation. Then in terms of understanding really the size of the opportunity, rather than using a one-size-fits-all or some sort of quick and dirty estimation process, we work closely with the research team to go backward from the appropriate sample base in the survey, such as recent purchasers, to identify all of the relevant filtering points. And we then use the survey data from terminations and dropouts from the survey, as well as market-specific population data to then come up with accurate estimates for each specific property or each specific property or each specific segment in order to give you the best thinking on terms of the size of the potential opportunities. And now back to Jamie.
Awesome, thanks, Michael. Coming out of our sizing methodology, it's often important to go deeper with our audiences of interest to really set the stage for both targeting and activation. And at this step of the way, we oftentimes conduct offshoot qualitative studies with either priority groups of interest or even adjacent audiences as well to really give context to the thinking around their nuances. Jordan, back to you to talk a little bit about targeting.
Great, thanks, Jamie. Yes, so once that audience segmentation is completed, the social team is able to use a digital approach where we can actually mirror these targets and create lookalike audiences so that we can understand digital behaviors and map interests. So we use our profiler tool, which utilizes Facebook's, like 15,000 plus data categories that go really far beyond just your basic demographics to really understand interests across arts, entertainment, different brand affinities, media, tech, hobbies. So really the list goes on. And from here, we really can hone in and understand that consumer digital activity and the unique interests and passion points for each of the segments, so we can get a really nice comprehensive understanding of all of these adjacent interests for each segment, as well as understanding where they currently are and what their digital footprint really looks like, which can help in your targeting. So the digital personas and the work from audience segmentation can come together to tell a really detailed story of each of these groups. and help identify interests of these established personas based on their actual digital behavior, which is a great complement to also getting that stated behavior and allowing the ability to target each of these segments really effectively. And I'll throw it back to Michael.
Thanks, Jordan. So I think, as Jamie had indicated, really a key part of this is understanding how you can then activate all these results and leverage them to improve your business. And so at this phase, what we typically would do is work on first a model to understand in a quantitative way what should be the appropriate winning outcome to use and understand how to best improve the business. A lot of times people will come to us with a set of potential outcomes, whether it's affinity, consideration of a brand, relevance, purchase, and what we are able to do is use a proprietary modeling approach based on Bayesian structural models to understand the connections between all of these elements, as well as the direction and impact. And because the technique is completely data driven, this approach really does facilitate finding the true best outcome measure for the research and giving us the greatest ability to activate on that. And once we've identified what the right outcome to use is, we can then also run modeling to utilize that in a driver's model, which provides real impacts, not relative impacts. So really understanding what the quantitative impact of changing people's opinions on specific attributes would be. And that provides not only the impacts, so understanding what you want to move, but a structural map of the cognitive connections that people make as they're going through their decision-making process to understand how to make those changes. And in our experience, to the extent you can craft messaging or communications campaigns that in terms of leveraging items that people are already connecting in their heads, that tends to help break through clutter and create much more sticky communications, and marketing activations, because you're tapping into things people already see a connection between, and you don't have those types of trying to make people figure out the right way to draw the connections. And now we'll pass it back to Jamie.
Excellent, thanks, Michael. So, folks, as I hope you're seeing from our presentation so far, we've built quite this stable of tools here to hone in on audience positioning for either new or returning IP. Greg, I'll turn it over to you for a few words on how this content positioning toolbox fits into the broader content strategy offering at Ipsos. Greg?
Thanks, Jamie. So here at Ipsos, we've spent much of the last year putting together an end-to-end research ecosystem across the entire content development and release lifecycle, all of which match innovative, best-in-class Ipsos solutions with content expertise. You'll see that system here, from creating or identifying or even improving IP to content positioning, which we just talked about, to optimizing marketing and ultimately measuring performance. Each of these specific steps of the ecosystem involves a number of different products or methodologies, as you saw with content positioning today. But it is important to note that they are built to work together at each step or across multiple steps, and to be customizable and scalable to whatever your business question might be. This was our second webinar this year. Our first one, which you may have attended, covered TV Dailies Plus in the measure performance section, our updated title tracking product, and content promo testing powered by Creative Spark, our creative testing tool there in optimizing marketing. If you have any questions about this presentation, or you would like to go back and watch the first, please feel free to reach out to me at any time. We'll be reaching out shortly when we're ready to dive into creating IP. but now some questions and answers. All right, let me see what we have here. So the first question, can you talk a little bit about how this solution can scale globally? Jamie, do you want to take this one?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a good question. Thanks, Greg, and for the person who asked that. I think the first thing to consider here is the global DNA of Ipsos. You know, we have boots on the ground in over 90 markets worldwide, and that's really meaningful in how we conduct any global project, but especially meaningful here because, as we all know, content comes in so many different flavors and can be adapted to be successful or to fail, honestly, in global markets. And so what we have purposefully done in developing this content positioning toolbox is to ensure that the methodological structure and also rigor can be conducted not only in the US, but in those external markets as well globally. And with the proliferation of that global emphasis in the content wars that we all see right now, that's just super important to emphasize here. So if there are any specific questions deeper than that regarding markets, regarding how the toolbox scales, the different pieces within it, we're happy, as Greg said, to field those questions and just feel free to reach out.
And just a little to add on to what Jamie said, I think it's important to note that studios have become platforms and platforms have become studios. This has really changed how content distribution is gone about. And that's the idea around why we have built these specific tools to fill that gap. So second question, what sources does your social listening tool cover? This would be a great one for Jordan.
Yes, I'm happy to answer that question. I actually think that part of the huge power that our social offering brings is the depth and breadth of the sources that we cover. So within our tool Synthesio, which also does have a global scope, we're able to understand social conversation across the major social networks of Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube. And Instagram is a really important one because that has had a lot of limitations on other platforms. But additionally, we also crawl and collect conversations across different blogs and forums as well. So both in the large scale, like the Reddits of the world, and also to more specific industry trades and forums and blogs as well. So we really are able to capture conversation anywhere that it's happening online.
Thanks, Jordan. One more here. What makes this positioning research feel different from the others that I've seen? Jamie, do you want to take this one?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Greg. So I think there are a few ways to answer this, but I think an important lens here is the notion of how traditional content positioning research can be conducted as a forward-looking tool for content marketers, and that's something that we hear over and over again. Take my insights out of the rearview mirror, out of being a point in time insight, and create a study in which we have confidence that forward-looking insights can be achieved, which will obviously impact the success or failure of the campaign and potentially the IP as well. So in particular, when we look at the analytics that Michael covered, our analytics suite is specifically designed here to connect dots into the audience psyche for how their behavior will play out should a marketing campaign lean on different hooks and levers, and the impact of those hooks and levers on engagement, tune in, subscription, whatever the big KPI is for that piece of IP. And so our analytics framework lends itself really well to this, and it was really at the forefront of what we were thinking when we developed this toolbox. It's a good question. Thanks.
Thanks, Jamie. One last question here. This one says, we have a robust internal database. How can this approach to segmentation be leveraged to help us understand those individuals? Michael, do you want to take this one?
Sure, happy to. And that's actually a question that we're hearing more and more these days as client organizations tend to gather their own data as well. I think the simple answer is it's totally possible and feasible to link the segmentation results to some type of internal database, whether it's a DMP or customer experience database. Typically what we would do is work with the client and the client service team, so Jamie's team, to build in a number of characteristics and variables that exist within that DMP into the actual quantitative survey. So that gives us more of a set of robust hooks across the two elements, so that once we develop the segmentations, we can then leverage that information to be more accurate in terms of typing that database, and we can certainly provide that in terms of either actually running the segments ourselves or providing a batch processing typing tool that clients can use directly.
Thanks so much, Michael. I would like to thank Greg, Jordan, Michael, and Jamie for today's interesting presentation. And thank you everyone for joining us today. If we didn't get your question, then we will do so by email. You will also receive an email with a direct link to today's recorded presentation. And of course, we welcome the opportunity to speak with you, so please feel free to reach out to us. That now concludes today's webinar. Have a wonderful day.